Thundercade. Terrorism has reached new heights. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Guys, what are some things today that are pictured to be as cool as motorcycles were in the 70s and 80s?
Huh. Wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Give me a second. I'll think of something.
Is it just like all future synthwave stuff now, Sean?
No, that's a very niche thing.
Okay.
Maybe
Teslas?
Like Teslas, Cybertrucks, a really high follower count on OkCupid.
Oh, a really high follower count. That is a good
on
answer.
OkCupid.
I'm sorry. I meant to say OnlyFans.
They're the same thing, right? The end goal is kind of the same.
Yeah.
Intimacy and all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that wasn't what this episode was really going to be about. We're not going to talk about the 80s and today. It's shmup time. That's right, you guys. I know you were waiting. When were we going to get another shmup on this system? We've had a drought. It's time again. Who's excited for some NES shmups?
I'm excited to take this to new heights. You know?
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like a Roger Ebert review of Terrorism.
Oh, the back of the box, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And Joe, you were speaking before the episode that, it says reach new heights, but you are a motorcycle on the ground.
Yeah, that's the new height. The low.
Yeah,
the
low.
ground.
High is the new low.
Too high,
Right,
so we have to go back to low.
Yeah, that's how it works. If you go too high, you end up low, but on another planet now.
So you're playing as a motorcycle.
No, you're playing as a guy riding a motorcycle.
Okay, you know what I mean. You're playing on a motorcycle instead of in a ship.
You're playing as the guy's brain, controlling the guy.
Yes.
The motorcycle.
But I guess the point I was trying to make is even some of the bosses in this game are just, helicopters or jets themselves, and yet they're fighting a motorcycle, which is kind of funny.
And sometimes, like, the boss is just, like, the top of a submarine. Like, not even, like, a whole submarine. Just, like, part of it. So it's even lower. Like, that's underwater.
Oh, yeah. That's even newer heights that we can't even fathom.
In Thundercade, you are part of Operation Thundercade. Duh. A special forces operation battling against the nuclear threat of the atomic age terrorist organization of Miracali?
I don't know.
It spells out AATOM, but with two A's. It kind of looks like a stock ticker. AATOM. Too many digits to be a stock ticker, but nevertheless, the atomic age terrorists, I guess they're terrorists in the name, which I don't think is that's not really like a done thing, right? No terrorist actually refers to themselves.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think they're usually like freedom fighters, but I appreciate their candor.
Their boldness,
self-awareness.
They don't give a shit. They want all the superheroes of the world to come up against them and try to take them down on their motorcycle. You play as a guy riding a motorcycle. Sorry if that was unclear earlier. You're just the guy on the motorcycle. This isn't Knight Rider. It's not the talking car. You play as the guy on the motorcycle. And you can have some, like, sidecar attachments that act as cannons, or you can have your B-7 bomber, which is, like, out of sight. You can summon him on command if you have the appropriate power-ups to do some damage as well. But otherwise, this is the shmups that we all know, right? There's not much here to cover in terms of, like, newness or freshness. The newness thing is the motorcycle, right? The idea that you're a guy on a motorcycle instead of being a flying spacecraft of any kind. I mean, remember, we've seen other objects, though, be shmup things. Remember Scoon?
Sure.
Where it's like, now you're a submarine?
That's true. This is not quite as high concept as Scoon, but it at least is getting away from planes and spaceships.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as like, yeah, the new thing being that you're on this motorcycle is really mostly just something that's like a visual and like in your own imagination thing, because otherwise it plays just like one of those spaceships, except for the fact that you can jump, which gives you like this look.
I would say it doesn't quite play exactly like it, but we'll get there.
Well, okay, it doesn't. I don't think it plays exactly like it because it's just different. It's just a different shmup, but I don't think anything about, personally, unless you change my mind, anything about the motorcycle is like, oh, this plays like a motorcycle. I just think it plays like a slow shmup. It
doesn't play like a motorcycle. Like it is a cool like context for pickups. Like, oh, it's your sidecar. You get a sidecar that can shoot sideways. Or you get a sidecar that shoots big bullets. But in terms of gameplay, like a lot of it is just standard shmup fare. But the one thing that I think that this game did differently, and not quite most of the other games that we're going to compare it to, is that like cover comes into play. And not saying that it had to just be a motorcycle thing to allow this, but I think it at least had to be ground based for it to make a lot of sense. Did you guys agree?
No, that checks out. That is a good point of like, because that's essentially what I was going to ask, is like, how far does the motorcycle gimmick get them? But you're right, the idea of it being on ground matters, because in all of our NES space games, we just assume that everybody is at the exact XYZ coordinates that like every attack would hit, but in this game, because you're on the ground and because your cover is also something that is destroyable, so that you can get power-ups and stuff like that. That's how you find those things. There is a game system there of like, take out the enemies first, then I guess if you still have time while the stage is scrolling, then take out your barriers to see if you can uncover some power-ups. There is a gamey aspect to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I'll be honest, I sort of took for granted the fact that you can take cover. Like I guess it's been a while since we played a shmup, so it didn't stand out to me as something new or something that we don't see very often. But yeah, I hadn't really thought of that. That is something that's a little different.
Well, also, the idea that the power-ups are just something you pick up is a little different than most shmups. I know this isn't the first time that's been done, but it is a different sense of progression where you're never too far away from being the most powered up thing, because you just have to find the power-ups through your destructibles, so this way you can reattach them or become even stronger. Some games we've seen, like, it requires points, or it requires like the conscious selection to not choose a power-up now to get a better power-up later. In this one, it's available to you, and if you can reach it, which sometimes is a obstacle in itself, going into the line of fire to reach those power-ups, if you can reach them, now you have them. But if you lose them, it's also easy to kind of gain them back.
Yeah, because it's one of those situations, I can't quite remember the last time we've seen this in a shmup, but where you can have two sidecars at a time, but once you pick up another power-up, and this power-up may or may not be more powerful, you could also get a power-up that sort of downgrades you. You do have to avoid those, so that you also just want to be kind of choosy once you're in a place that you're comfortable in, or a specific power-up that like suits the terrain that you're playing in. Like sometimes you'll want those side-shooting sidecars, and sometimes you really don't need them at all.
Yeah, and also because these power-up sidecars are so fickle, I guess, that you can like, you're also not ever even when you're powered up, you're not very far away from your base form again, right?
Yeah.
It just takes a couple hits and you're back to pretty much where you started, which does make it feel a little more like, frantic doesn't feel like the right word, but a little more like, I don't know, high stakes, fast pace. Like you got to really dodge things. Like you're really powerful now, you can end up being back to being not powerful or dead pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that only really becomes a problem during boss fights, because for the most part, I kind of like that, yeah, it's high stakes and you will lose these things pretty fast, just because of how many enemies and bullets are being thrown at you. But you can always pick them up very quickly again through the regular stage. So it doesn't run into that Gradius problem where you won't have the ability to like recover all your power-ups if you have to start a stage over, like they're always kind of, within reach, except for when you get to the points in the stages where it stops scrolling, and now you have boss fights where no additional power-ups will come your way. I'm kind of a little shocked that they didn't choose to, like, make some disposable barriers, since that seems to be part of the gameplay here, into the boss fights. But to me, that is where it actually falls apart, because of how easily bullets take out your power-ups and how quickly you reapply them. It's a little strange that once you get to the actual, like, meat and potatoes of the shmup, the boss fight, which is a very long one-on-one fight, that you're just kind of expected to duke it out with whatever you came into the fight with.
Yeah, and this isn't unique to this game, like, especially with something like Gradius. But no, it's really frustrating to end up, like, in a boss fight with just this pea shooter that you start out with on your lone motorcycle with no sidecars. And I think when you die, you like lives, that you just respawn in the same screen. So
immediately, yeah.
You have to use a continue if you don't have the firepower, or you don't have the skill to use your current firepower, which is really frustrating.
And there's no tell either, in enemies or in boss fights, to know if you're actually, like, doing any damage, which, granted, is fine for most of the enemies, because most enemies are 1 or 3 hits max if you're, like, a tank or something. It is a little weird that there's no, for things that have extra health, there's no, like, sign of damage. And I'm not talking about, like, cosmetically, I'm just talking about blinking, But it's really bad in boss fights, because I don't know about you guys, but even the first one, Sean, you mentioned that submarine half submerged.
Yeah.
It has no. You would think maybe there's, like, a weak spot that I'm not hitting, because otherwise it's just absorbing your bullets, and there's no health bar for it or anything like that. And these guys are kind of damaged sponges. Like, they have a lot of health to them, mini boss or full boss. And so I feel like, there needed to be some kind of communication in terms of, like, what am I, how far along am I, or am I doing any damage to these? Because I felt like with that first stage boss fight with the plane, I was, like, actually shocked at, like, a shmup starting off like this after having, like, mostly easy enemies. Just a plane that just shoots bullets like crazy, expects you to just, like, dodge everything, but last long enough to take it down. And I did make it through this stage. It's not impossible. But it is just surprising how all of a sudden this thing becomes, like, so, like, a bullet hell, but where there's very little in your corner. There's very little going for you.
And for me, like, first of all, I do think this game is hard even when you're just in the standard levels. But the thing that really peeves me in this game is that, like, in these bosses, these plane bosses, it sort of forgets that you're like a ground-based, you're a motorcycle. All of a sudden, this plane just starts moving any which way, and acts like you're in a flying shmup. And I just thought that was silly. And I don't know if you guys felt that as well, but if you're gonna, like, have the context of your game be that this is, like, all happening on the ground, like, maybe a plane that moves in all 8 directions shouldn't be a boss.
Well, even the motorcycle moves, you can just move directly sideways.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And, like, that's kind of what I was referencing at the beginning, where I was like, nothing about it being a motorcycle really feels like it's different than the ship, other than what you mentioned, the ground cover.
And in, like, but at least, like, in the standard levels, like, the screen is moving not fast, but it's moving enough that it's like, oh, this is just like me turning and the camera is following the motorcycle. But in the bosses, it just doesn't make any goddamn sense. So
yeah,
that's I guess what I was saying.
Yeah, I ended up for most of the bosses just trying to save my airstrikes, and then I would just call in like 3 or 4 airstrikes at once and just destroy them. But yeah, I mean, wasn't particularly fun to do it that way. It was just the most viable way.
And the airstrike is a very satisfying kind of power-up, one that feels very strong. I don't know how strong it actually is or whatever, because I only used it on boss fights, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing more ridiculous power-ups like that in shmups. You know, we saw like in 1942, you just have like, you know, you do an aerial dodge as your secondary button, and that's not really like that cool of a thing to do. That's just like a flight maneuver. Calling on your own B-17 bomber to then like, you know, just do a raid on the boss is just really cool. It feels like something like, you know how like in Call of Duty when you get those kill streaks and then all of a sudden you're able to you're just able to like have insane power-ups. That's what that feels like, but in a shmup. I wouldn't, you know, for a game like Thundercade, I wouldn't mind being able to summon a thunderstorm that just takes out the entire screen.
Or summon Bahamut Zero.
Right.
Yeah.
Why
or
can't
cast
you
Zeta
summon
Flare.
Bahamut Zero? Or Donald Duck.
Yeah. I can
Every
confirm
other
though that
episode.
when you're really feeling trapped or cornered or there's a lot of enemies on the screen, one of those airstrikes will take out a significant chunk of every enemy. It does pack a big punch for those situations. So kind of, you know, it was kind of I had to decide whether I wanted to save them for the bosses, which I ultimately did, or use them in those very cool moments when I could clear part of the screen.
Not to like harp on, I mean, because we've done this in other shmup games as well, but like, you know, the amount of bullets that are coming at you on this screen, and the speeds of the bullets vary too. Like the size of the bullets vary for that matter. This was a little too much for me personally. I had my limit.
I agree
with this game,
and that's why I thought that this game was much more difficult than a lot of the ones we played.
Really? I thought that what bothered me about this was not the difficulty, but it was the slowness of it. Like, I never felt like, maybe it's because I used the plane a little bit, but like, I never felt like I was like overwhelmed by bullets. I just felt like I was like just trudging along, and like, that's what my problem with was. Like, I never felt like it was super bullet hell-ish compared to a lot of other shmups we played where everything's really fast. Like, I feel like most shmups I don't like because I'm just particularly bad at shmups and I have slow reaction time. This one I felt, I mean, I still wasn't good at it, but I felt like it was more manageable, but just never got exciting.
I think a part of it for me is, like, the bane of my existence was the helicopters, because they just come in and they're moving fast and their bullets are moving fast, and sometimes they just blend into the background. And so if I have a sidecar, I'm losing it there. And if I don't, I'm dying there. It was just like, whenever you got those like little helicopter raids on you, that would just ruin me.
Yeah, I hear that. And also, full disclosure, when I'm talking about it being not, never getting super bullet helly, I'm only talking about like the first maybe 2.5 levels. I didn't get very far in this game, so maybe it does get worse as it goes on.
Well, I think a bigger problem is like for the regular stage, right? You can just knock out the enemies that are shooting at you, and they're gone. On the boss fights, it's all or nothing in terms of fighting these bosses. I would have appreciated if even like, we've seen this in games like Contra. It doesn't have to be exclusive to shmups, where if you're taking on a plane, right, already ridiculous as it is, you should be able to take off the individual cannons, so that it slowly becomes a maybe like easier fight because it's so hard right at the get-go. But instead, it just becomes one of these things where even if you learn the pattern of like, okay, the bullets are in a spray formation where they make like wide V's and then small V's on the way out. Like, who cares, right? Like, first off, that sounds like nonsense to me. But like, let's pretend that I was good at something like that where I could recognize that pattern. You have to do it for so long. There's never a moment where you feel like you're gaining leverage on these things until they blow up.
Yeah, exactly. Because I do think that some of them, at least, like, they will stop shooting from the ports that you... Because a lot of them are, like, multi-stage, like, enemies. Where, like, at least, like, if you blow up a turret, it'll stop shooting out of that turret. But I feel like it just keeps getting faster on the turrets that you haven't blown up. So it ends up being like a net zero sort of thing. But maybe that was just how I experienced it in my mind.
So just to talk a little more about the overall speed of it. I mean, did it bother anyone else that it was like so trudgingly slow? I feel like, I guess obviously if you're being literal about it, being on a motorcycle is technically slower than being on a spaceship. but it's supposed to feel fast on a motorcycle. It's almost like this goes deliberately at like a crawling speed. And it does not feel like a motorcycle to me. It just feels like a trudge.
I know what you're saying, but even the feeling of going backwards on a motorcycle just feels wrong. like movement here in terms of speed. The scroll is slow in itself, but also just like the way that the motorcycle moves has no sense of speed itself, regardless of the scrolling the limit.
They kind of like messed up on two fronts. Like in order to make it feel like there's some speed, like you can have the enemies move relatively to you at the same pace, I think, but then you have to like recontextualize the backgrounds as moving like constantly, like in a space shmup, which is a lot easier because all you need is like a star field being animated as moving. Whereas in this, like they want you to use the buildings as cover, so you can't have the buildings move past you fast. And then at the end, like when you're fighting, you know, the end boss, the dreaded nuclear reactor, like you're literally just sitting in a room, but you're just swerving back and forth, and somehow that makes you move. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like, I know that this would totally change the game, and I'm not suggesting that they would do this, but, you know, we just recently played, and I'm blanking, the motorboat...
Cobra
Triangle. Like, that made you feel like you're in a boat. And yes, if you were to go too far in that direction with this, it would be a totally different game. I'm not suggesting that, but, like, they could go somewhat in that direction and just make the physics and the way you turn feel a little more... like a motorcycle. And I'm not even saying that because I really want a game that feels like a motorcycle. I just like, I'm not sure we fully sold, if you guys agree with me, just how dull this game is. Like, I feel like it's just really
we're kind of
boring.
Overhyping it, I think.
Well,
yeah,
okay, no, we're not overhyping it, because I would say I even went as far as earlier this week on our Twitter page to just take a random still from the gameplay, and I said, out of context, if you know nothing about this game, this looks like a glitched page. Like it looks like the motorcycle is in the water, and then there's an area with more water inside that water. This is the blue level.
Oh, with all the hills
but like,
that don't look like hills.
It just looks like nonsense.
Yeah,
it looks like a nonsense sprite sheet.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, that's just like a still from the game. It's not a pretty game. It's not. You know, I didn't want to play our whole hand in before the essential games list.
I'm just giving it all up right now. I'm telling you, I'm not voting this essential.
Okay. but like you know what, I know what you mean, Joe. But I also don't think that it's the worst game that we played, and we have to cover like, you know, all the different aspects of it too. But if you would like to say more, other than just the slowness of the speed, of other pet peeves that bothered you about this game, I will listen.
Well, here, first of all, you started the conversation right now that I think at least, what are there, 6 stages? I think at least three of the 6 stages look, you know, texture-wise, just look like a total mess. Like, that was the first thing that I thought of, too. I was like, what? Why are they, like, I get that they're trying to go for, like, a textured ground.
I'd say but... the one that stands out the most to me is the tunnel. Because, like, you're going through... Yeah, all of these places, like maybe they don't like pass themselves off as a city, and they don't really pass themselves off as like a military base, but at least like the ground looks like it's ground or a road or something. And then you get in the tunnel, and then you're just playing on like a white field, and things are popping out from like nowhere or from the sides. But there's like it doesn't look like it's rocky. It doesn't look like it's a tunnel that's paved. It just looks like they forgot to texture this.
Yeah, it's weird because of how much over textured other levels are, and this one has literally no texture. And like you see a pothole that like when you blow something up, and it just looks like something that's like floating down through space because suddenly there's like a little piece of texture. Another thing. This is, you know, maybe getting into a little more nitpicky, but why is there just one song
Yeah.
That does not sound like it fits this. It sounds like it's like it sounds like a song that goes at the end of like a coming of age movie. like it's a very like happy, like, oh, like we're doing it now. Like it's not exciting, it's not actiony. It's like, oh, I turned my life around. Is what is the vibe I get from this music.
Well, you're trying to turn your life around from terrorism.
That's
to
true.
new
That
heights.
is true.
Well,
Right.
there is a questionable ending to the game, right? Where you show up at this nuclear plant that I believe belongs to the terrorist organization, AATOM, and they are like just a bunch of soldiers in a bunker. So it's not even like a final boss where like
In the
there's
nuclear
anything-
reactor.
Yeah, they're just in the nuclear reactor, and you're shooting at them. Somehow, you're like shooting at the guys all the way at the top of the reactor too, even though you're on a motorcycle. You take them all out. And then you proceed to blow up the nuclear reactor, causing what I can only imagine is, atomic
Catastrophic,
levels of
yeah.
catastrophic danger, which makes me wonder, were they really the terrorists? Or were these guys
It sounds
just
like,
caught off
yeah,
guard?
you're the terrorist here.
Yeah, like they're hiding, they're doing the last thing. The last resort is that the only soldiers left are now, like, trying to do a shootout with you.
I mean,
in the
Chernobyl.
bunkers. Yeah.
Chernobyl had
Right.
only occurred not that long ago. I wouldn't say that it's the best idea to blow up a nuclear reactor. Didn't they see the HBO miniseries? I don't know.
Would you be surprised to know that there are not one sequel and spinoff for this game?
Absolutely not.
And since there are no sequels and spinoffs, there's only one thing left to do. That is the essential games list. Sean, we're going to start with you.
There exists a combination of game mechanics and decisions that make a motorcycle based shmup work. But this is not quite that combination. I do appreciate that they tried some things, but they didn't do it very well at all. So this is not essential.
Joe?
Yeah, so I know everyone's on the edge of their seat about what my vote's going to be, but here goes. I do think that this is like there are a couple of elements that are interesting elements that they put into a bad game. Like I think that's like I never like shmups or rarely like shmups, but this one is not like a dislike because shmups aren't my thing. This one just felt really boring to me. So I'm going to not vote it essential.
That's very surprising.
Yes.
I'm surprised.
I would say that for those of you looking for a game where you're on a motorcycle and you shoot bullets, look no further than Mach Rider.
Mach
What?
Rider?
Did you call me?
That is how you do it, baby. So it's maybe 3 of the quickest no's we've ever had on the show, but I don't think this is, like, yes, it is in the bottom half for sure, but I don't think it's the worst game. I just don't think it's ever worth talking about again. And so we will only reference it as a joke in future episodes, like when we refer to Street Cop for 2 episodes in a row.
I can't wait.
These are the things that happen sometimes. Sean, any other episodes you want to call out right now as just truly terrible?
Just that the episode was terrible or the game was terrible?
I would love to hear what episodes you think are terrible, but yeah, let's stick to games right now.
I don't really know. I mean, it's hard when you put me on the spot like that. I think all games are great. Every game is perfect in its own little way. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
There you go. Joe, any other thoughts?
Any other thoughts? I'll say that this game recommends, for a safety precaution, that you pause it for 10 to 15 minutes after 2 hours of more. Not for your safety, but because it extends the life of the game pack. I never knew that, but that's what it says
I
in
don't
the
think that's
manual. It might not be true, but it says that in the manual.
Well, I appreciate that tip. Maybe certain copies of Thundercade are worth more because they have less miles on them.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
that's true.
Right.
What's the blue book on this game?
Right. Actually, I did look at that, and it's a rather cheap game as long as you're not looking for the box. Like most NES games, for some reason, all of a sudden the boxes are very hot. If you have a box, not even the game, just sell that thing right now. Don't buy the game and then sell them together because most of the cost goes to the game.
Yet another example of nostalgia price fixing.
Yeah, we're doing it all day. Also, you know what I was just thinking, since you were put on the spot about episodes and stuff like that, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from episode 174. Now, that is a game that people talk about all the time and shit on. And yet, I think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a better game than Thundercade.
Well, the thing about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is that it's more unique and bad. Like, bad and unique, you'll live on forever. Bad and whatever this is, nostalgia will never talk about you again.
And that's really it for this episode. We will certainly be talking to you again next Friday when we do the Adventures of Tom Sawyer. We'll do a reading of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I guess we'll play the game too, but might as well read an excerpt from the book. Wasn't expecting this to be a video game. It's made by Winkysoft. Ever heard of them? Winkysoft.
Ugh.
I guess I shouldn't have said like soft because it's like software, so it's Winkysoft.
Winkysoft.
Winkysoft. No, whoa.
I didn't say nothing.
It's like a PG-13, mostly R-rated podcast anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's next Friday. In the meantime, chat with us on Twitter at NostalgiaCast or support us directly, patreon.com/nostalgia. $5 a month. Members get access to our brand new show, Nostalgia Bites. Episode 1 is coming up soon, Nuts and Milk. Believe it or not, yes, we are doing a game called Nuts and Milk. You've never heard of it because it's a Famicom game, and that's the whole point of Nostalgia Bites. They are bite-sized episodes about Famicom games that you can play. No Japanese required. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to patreon.com/nostalgia and give us a little support button. Or if you can't support us that way, just say support on Twitter and just add us. That's a great way to show support.
Yeah, just say support out loud while listening to our podcast on repeat for a week straight.
Why don't we just all say it in unison and that they can join us? So we'll do like count of 3. We'll all say support all at the same time, and so will the listener. Okay?
All right.
Okay.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Support. Do you guys remember when we did that really long "yeah boy" at the subway station in Queens?
I've still got that snap.
I do too.